All right, so continuing on, let's continue talking about fallibility and how that's a problem for relativism. So again, it seems as though we're morally fallible. So let's take some examples. Let's say when you were a kid, let's say you were a little bit mean to some group of people in high school. Let's say that you and your clique were a little bit nasty and dismissive or condescending towards another group of people or something like that, right? You might now think, well, that wasn't very nice. I really shouldn't have treated them like that. That really wasn't the right thing to do. I should have been a bigger, better person, and been more accommodating, and reached out to those other people a little bit more, tried to include them and things like that. Or, on the societal level, let's take an example. There's lots of historical examples where we think that, a society made a mistake morally and they could have done better. So let's take American slavery, right? We look back on that, we think, well, that wasn't the right thing to do. We shouldn't have done that, right? People shouldn't have done that at that time. They should have known better. That was cruel and, cruel, awful treatment of other people. So it looks as though how we want to interpret these things, the natural way to interpret these things, as though is in the way that we think we as individuals or as a group made mistakes morally, right? That we did the wrong thing, and that maybe we've learned now, and we hope to have learned from those mistakes, and we hope that we would do better given future opportunities. Now, the problem for relativism here is that relativism has difficulty making sense of this kind of fallibility, right? The kind of relativism that we've been considering, is one that says that whether something is moral or not depends upon how an individual judges it, whether an individual accepts it or approves of it, or whether relativism at the level of a society talks about whether a society accepts or approves of some practice or action. And applied to our examples, right, relativism would seem to say that nothing immoral was done in the past, right? So if relativism is true, why wouldn't we want to say that, when you were in high school and you treated those people in a certain way, and you deemed that to be acceptable way to treat those people, or you deemed that to be morally acceptable, that it was morally acceptable? It looks like that's what relativism would say about that. So likewise, it looks as though relativism would say about past, things that societies did in the past, that since the society accepted or approved of those things in the past, that those things were then at that time morally right, that they were morally acceptable. So it looks as though relativism will say that, your treatment of those certain people in high school was in fact morally okay. And it looks as though relativism will say that the practice of slavery in America at the time when society accepted that or approved of that was morally okay. That in fact was it was moral. And it was within the bounds of morality, we should say. Now, what that seems to say is that what that seems to imply is a kind of moral infallibilism, right? A kind of situation where you can't make moral mistakes, because if you judge something or approve of something, that then in fact is okay. It is morally all right. So that's a problem, because naturally it seems to us as though we are morally fallible. I mean, don't we want to say that we can make moral mistakes as individuals and as societies? Don't we want to say that the American society made a moral mistake with the practice of slavery? Presumably, we do want to say that, but relativism has trouble, making sense of that. It looks as though it's got to say that, no, that actually wasn't a moral mistake. That was the right thing to do. And that just seems false. I think very naturally, when we evaluate ourselves, we evaluate our society, past versions of our society, how we might act in the future. We have a very strong sense of fallibility. We think, well, we better be vigilant, or we could in fact make a moral mistake. And it looks as though the problem for relativism is that it almost seems impossible to make a moral mistake if the relativist picture is right. And the problem there is that I'm trying to sort of articulate the problem in different ways for you, the same problem. Maybe most simply, the problem is that it seems to us very much as though we are morally fallible, that we are prone to moral error, both as individuals and as societies. We think that individuals can make moral mistakes, and we think that entire societies can make moral mistakes. The problem for relativism is that it doesn't really seem to allow for this kind of fallibility. It in fact seems to suggest that individuals and societies would be morally infallible, because whenever they judge something to be acceptable or right, then it is right. And that, since that just seems to be wrong, that just seems to be implausible, that kind of infallibility seems to be implausible, that's a problem for relativism. Okay, I'm trying to make this as clear as I can, because this is going to be a test question, I think. I think I'm going to ask about why the idea of moral fallibility is a problem for relativism. So again, the problem is that it seems to us, I think the common sense view is that we are morally fallible. We are prone to making mistakes. So, I mean, it's just the idea that we're not morally perfect. Sometimes we make moral mistakes, sometimes serious moral mistakes. But relativism cannot straightforwardly make sense of moral fallibility. Because it relativizes morality to the judgments of individuals or societies, it looks as though when an individual judges something to be right, then it will be right. Right? So that would make, if whenever an individual judges something to be right, it therefore is right, that would make someone morally infallible. If whenever a society judged or accepted some practice to be right, it was right, that would make the society morally infallible. And that's what relativism appears to do. It appears to imply that either individuals or societies will be morally infallible, because whenever they judge something to be right or accept something to be right, it is right. The problem with that is, again, that the common sense just tells us that we're not morally infallible, that we do make moral mistakes, and societies can make moral mistakes too. We did with slavery, say Germany did with the whole, the Holocaust. And there are other mistakes being made in other societies as we speak today, unfortunately. So that's the problem of fallibility. So again, if you have questions about that further, if you're confused with the review question that I put up, you can get in touch with me, and I encourage you to do so. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to stop this segment. There's going to be one more sort of wrap-up segment on relativism, and then that's going to be all the lectures that I upload before the test. So there'll be one more segment I'm going to record next.